received. Next to the stage we have Narrelle Harris. Narrelle.
Taller than the last two. My book collection is called Showtime. We've been discussing among ourselves, calling it domestic horror. The stories are often about ordinary people in quite extraordinary situations. The story I'm reading from, Thrall, is set in Hungary, so I apologise in advance, there will be an accent, a generic Eastern European accent. And in this particular section I'm reading to you, there's a vampire called Dragomir who's returned to Hungary because he's just not coping with the 21st century terribly well and wants to withdraw to his home castle for a bit of a rest. So in this particular situation, we have an extraordinary person trying to deal with the very ordinary and not coping with it terribly well. He's invited a waitress who was insulting to him to the park. "So," said the waitress as she lit a cigarette, "you want to talk or something?" Charmingly, the waitress seemed to think she was there in the dark with him, of her own free will. "No," replied Dragomir with a slow smile. "You want anything else, you got to buy me a drink," she told him with a cool look, "and maybe not even then." "I do not want you for talk," he said. "I do not want you for anything you can imagine." She snorted an inelegant, smoky laugh. "I seen you on YouTube," she said. "I know what you want." Dragomir scowled. "And you don't want me at all," the waitress continued. "Not your type, am I? Granny groper, that's you." Dragomir's eyes were flinty, but she failed to notice his eyes, or his teeth. "Molesting grannies, isn't it what you done? Some poor old woman at a train station, hand down her blouse. She walloped you proper with that handbag of hers." She laughed at the memory. Which was not what had happened, not at all. He'd been stalking a young man through a train station in Rome. The lad was tall, powerful, full of life, full of blood. His swagger had promised Dragomir something wonderful. Only when he had sidled up to the boy, he had turned out to be less young, less fresh, less gypsy than he had at first appeared. The boy had a little family all waiting for him, and the grandmother had been most ferocious in their defence. She whipped out a cross from a chain around her neck, one of a dozen or more she wore, and smashed it to his face, burning the shape of it into his jaw. The whole family joined in the fray. The older sister kicked him, the boy himself threw a savage punch. The grandmother set about him with her heavy handbag, which was apparently filled with rosaries and bricks. The fight spilled out onto the station concourse, and Dragomir fought to free himself from a sudden knot of the crosses the old lady wore, which got tangled across his fist and burned his hand. He tore at the crosses, intending to render her defenceless, but she screamed and pressed her cross-bedecked bosom against his face, burning him threefold. The youngest child, an insolent prepubescent girl, had filmed the whole thing on her damned phone. Then the rest of the unspeakable mob at the station had borne down upon Dragomir, calling him pervert and sicko and rapist and evil dwarf. Escaping the mob had not been difficult, but those looks of derision and disgust followed him all through Rome, then across the border into Slovenia. Thus Dragomir learned about YouTube and what hits meant, especially when there were 1 million of them. The original footage was called something that translated to "Granny beats off groper with a handbag," although there were other versions now. He had paid someone to find and show him every awful permutation. Some were intercut with tacky vampire films, others with wrestling matches. Some had been set to music. In one version, "Eye of the Tiger" heralded his flight from the crowd into a departing train. It was impossible to escape the sneering glances of those who recognised him from the videos. Likewise, impossible to escape the cross-shaped burns on his face and hands. In time, they would heal. In the meantime, they branded him like this vile century branded him with its labels of perversion and cursed him with people who fought back instead of giving in decently to his mesmeric eyes and his want. The waitress was laughing at him. She held up her ridiculous little phone and pointed it at his marked face. "Hey, smile for the camera. I'm going to put you on my friends page so everyone can see I met the granny groper from Rome."
And thank you, Narrelle.